We're going to demonstrate how to install the critical trigger for the ion. First we have to take the stock trigger out. So we've got the ion apart. We're going to go ahead and pull the stock trigger out. You can use a punch or a press to get that out. The trigger comes out pretty easily. One of the first things that I would recommend doing here is unscrewing this, bringing it down flush to the inside of the frame. That's this screw, which would normally be would adjust the angle of the trigger. It's going to do the same thing with the critical trigger, but it no longer has any effect on the magnet. So I start off with this being flush inside the frame. And that gives you greater control over the angle of the trigger. They tend to use a lot of Loctite in there, so it's a little bit stiff. So this screw is now flush, and it won't get in the way of the trigger. We can use that to adjust the angle of the trigger later on, but we'll get to that. So now we have our critical trigger for the ion in its package. The trigger itself, and the cap clip, and the pro pin. The cap clip has a little bit of double-sided tape right here. You can see it, and what that's for is to make it easy to install. Just peel it off, and it just sits right on top of the capacitor, just like that. And it holds the magnet in the proper position to repel. So once we do that, go ahead and check the ions. See, some ions come with different tolerances. The ions will be anywhere from perfect to a little bit larger to a little bit tighter. This particular one we have is fairly tight. We use extended inner rings on the bearings so that at no point in time does the trigger ever touch the side of the frame. It's always the bearing, so you have a smooth pull. So on this particular trigger or frame, it's going to require us to file the inside of the frame slightly. So I'd get a nice flat file here and do it evenly on both sides. And you want a snug fit, but not too tight. Too tight and the trigger would bind. So once we got the filing out of the way and the trigger fits in there nicely, we want to get the pro pin out. Slide that through. Slides right through the trigger and the gun. You want to have the trigger free floating, not binding, not sticking. That's a smooth trigger right there. So that's good. Once you get that, take the other side of the pro pin. We recommend using a little bit of blue Loctite on there. Although there's an O-ring, typically won't back out. Just to assure that it won't, put a small drop of blue Loctite. Okay, so once you have your trigger in and your pro pin in, you can slide your board back in with the cap clip. ahead and reinstall the banjo fitting. And close it back up. So we've been a 2-minute install if the this particular ion hadn't required filing, but we picked this one so that you could see if you had to file the ion how to do it. So doing that's a pretty straightforward process. What you want to do is look at your trigger and see how the angle. I would prefer to have it back a little bit in the frame. So what we'll do is we'll use that screw to start bringing this trigger back in the frame. So grab this. This is the one we loosened up earlier. Put that in there. As you see, as I start to turn it, the trigger starts moving back in the frame. You can make some more adjustments here with your backstop. Make sure you're not bottoming out on the switch. The middle one is switch actuation point. So if you'd like it to fire a little early in the pull, right here we're a couple millimeters into the pull, then actuating. So we'd like it to fire maybe a little bit earlier. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to screw the middle one in. So now you have a real smooth, fast trigger. You can also adjust the tension with the top screw. That's actually the magnet. Screw it in to get more tension, to make the trigger stiffer. There you have it. That's as easy as it is. One other thing that you may need to look out for is occasionally on some aftermarket boards and some of the other boards due to different tolerances in the manufacturing of the frames, the switch can be off to one side. So if your set screw is hitting the side of the switch and it's sliding off or going over the top, what you can do is put a nut on there or a small piece of macroline. Just cut a 1/4 inch piece of macroline off, 1/8 inch piece of macroline, and screw it onto the end of the threads. It'll effectively widen up the set screw, and then it'll touch the switch no matter what.